listening to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. Welcome to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. This is Dr. Charles Laux, and we are recording our episode number 102 today with a wonderful, wonderful guest, a fine cellist, researcher, pedagogue, and presenter. This is Dr. Benjamin Whitcomb. Benjamin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so Dr. Whitcomb is the professor of cello and music theory at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and you've been there for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about your path to starting music and getting to where you are now, because you've done some awesome things I know with ASTA, and your journal articles in the ASTA are just the ASTA Journal are just amazing, and all your cello resources. So can you give us like a little synopsis about where you came from and what you've done?
Yes, certainly.
Awesome.
The short of it is, I was actually born in northern Florida, but grew up from age 2 to 20 in Stillwater, Oklahoma, northern Oklahoma, where then I did my undergraduate with Evan Tonsing, who's a student of Raymond Stuhl, and then started a master's degree up at Boston University with George Nykrug, but then got married and completed the master's and then did the doctoral degree down at UT Austin.
Very cool.
With Phyllis Young.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I tell you, right out of, basically my wife and I kind of had to decide, okay, who's going to finish up the dissertation and then immediately start applying for jobs, and who's going to do another year of assistantships.
And she's a musician too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, Pamela Whitcomb, she's the director of AR Editions, Critical Editions publishing company over in Middleton, Wisconsin.
Wow. Okay.
So that year, strangely enough, there were 3 positions around the country open for people, positions that wanted cello/music theory.
Okay.
And one of them was in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and I auditioned there and only there. The other 2, they accepted me, and I've been there for the past 26 years.
Wow.
So
okay.
It's kind of funny, the people who kind of move from time to time, but I guess I'm of the don't fix it if it ain't broke. Mold.
Well, we just had Bob Gillespie on, and we were talking about that a little bit on our episode 100, just about how he was offered other positions, and he went to his family and said, this is not the best thing for us. So it's great to stay in one spot. Had I stayed in Nevada, my first teaching position, I could retire next year. But instead, I have to do 9 more years because I moved around, And it's great. I love what I'm doing, but it's just kind of crazy to think about. So that's fantastic. 26 years at UW-Whitewater. Fantastic.
Right.
And you teach all the cello students, and then some music theory as well?
That's right. There are 3 of us music theory faculty that divide the music theory classes, and one of the others is also /applied, his applied clarinet.
Okay.
Which I kind of think is a interesting way to do things at smaller departments. We never have more than about 200 music majors and 100 music minors.
It's a decent size, though. It's that was the size of my undergraduate at Ohio U, and I just found that was like, it was big enough you could do a lot, but it was small enough you knew people, and you could, you're not having to take lessons from a TA, right? You're teaching all the students, and that was super valuable for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then these positions that we have that are this and this, where your very job description has you wearing more than one hat. I think that's good too, because then we're like, okay, I'm on the instrumental faculty when we get together, and I'm on the theory faculty, and it's, I don't know, it's a friendly group of colleagues, and I love them, but I think just even that situation is less likely to give rise to kind of turfiness when people are all just kind of in their own area.
Yeah. You it's maybe easier to get along and do some good work, and I don't know all the ins and outs of when I was an undergraduate, but it seemed like the professors really worked well together, and I just remember such a great experience. So that sounds very similar. What are like I said, your research and your articles are just top notch. And if people listening haven't seen Dr. Whitcomb's articles, they're just so detailed, but so practical at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the the research you've done, or some of the articles you maybe have written recently? Some of the topics. I think that would be of interest to a lot of people. And obviously, as a violinist, I'm all about learning more about the cello, and I have my cello back here, and there it is. Yeah. So and I play it from time to time, and then really love it. But
yeah, I think, again, probably not uniquely, my research has been a mix of things born out of just what I find myself doing a lot in the studio to fill in a particular, this book covers this and this, but there's kind of a gap that needs to be filled. And then also I guess these relate is kind of what I tended to teach in the studio, and then where I see that there's a need. So for example, I've done not just, I guess it started from doing an article here, an article there, and then being asked to do presentations on cello fingerings that then gave rise to a whole book on it. And it's interesting to me, to this day, one can run across string players who think, it's too personal, you know what I mean, to write a book on principles of cello fingerings. And I totally will admit that there are many principles involved and many factors involved. Hand size, larger, smaller hand, and of course, whether you're trying to do faster passages just to get the job done cleanly, or slower passages to maximize expression. But
well, at least you're not doing bass fingerings, because we know that those are like very personal, even more personal than cello fingerings, I think.
Well, even there, I've actually got a book on bass fingerings too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
And part of it is, I think that especially young bassists don't necessarily make use of at least considering going across the strings sometimes, and you see them going and like, you could have just
when you play the bass, if you have the right fingerings, it's like all the difference in the world. And I tell my students, I said, like, you have to be thinking ahead and thinking about how can you make this easier, because there's a lot of ground to cover.
It's a big distance.
Yeah. So what are the titles of your books? Because I would love to check those out, and I think our listeners would also be interested. The Orchestra Teacher Podcast is sponsored by Kaleidoscope Adventures. Recruiting and retaining talented musicians is essential for new orchestra directors building a program. And one of my favorite tips for generating interest is to plan a trip. There are so many options. You can participate in a festival at an amusement park, take the stage at Carnegie Hall in New York City, or travel abroad and perform in Vienna, the legendary city of music. Wherever you end up, not only will your current students look forward to the trip, but younger students will count the days until it's their turn to go. If you have no idea where to start, connect with Kaleidoscope Adventures by visiting the link in the show notes. They've been planning exceptional performance travel since 1993 and will make you look like a seasoned professional.
Well, not necessarily inspired. The cello fingerings one is called Cello Fingerings.
Okay.
Well, I guess it does have a subtitle: Improve Your Left Hand Game.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Have to have that subtitle.
Yeah, I'm writing this down.
There's a bass fingerings book. And then there is a cello-only book that is a guide to the Popper Etudes.
Oh, wow.
Because you know how much cellists love to, if there's one thing we're going to nerd out, well, two things. It's going to be the Bach suites.
Yes.
Popper
Etudes. That's pretty much, that's all the cello repertoire that's out there, right? No, there's nothing else. Right? Nothing else exists.
And the Dvorak concerto.
Right. Everybody wants to play that. And Elgar, I guess, too. So.
Right, yeah.
Okay, there's a lot. Yeah.
And then there's, I did a book that I adapted for cello, viola, and violin chords. It rolls off the tongue better for cello. Compendium of Chords for the cello.
Okay.
And I have the compendium also for the viola and for the violin.
Very cool.
In one respect, you could look at this as just kind of a different way of thinking about borne off finger patterns across the strings.
Okay.
But it's also my secondary intention. Maybe there's 3 intentions or something. There's a way in which when we play arpeggios, if we can think, okay, this is just a rolled chord over time, it can tie into our theory knowledge a little bit better without maybe the theory being quite so painful.
Yeah.
And then also being able to think chordally on our string instruments, for me at least, and when I try to teach improvisation, helps a lot in terms of, because the moment that you're saying, okay, so we're going to do B flat blues or something. So initially, okay, for these couple of bars, pick notes out of this collection. Oh, and then the chord changes now out of E flat. Yeah. And so if your hand just knows, oh, I'm going from this to this, and now I'm going to do the same basic patterns, but in this position, it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah, that does simplify a lot.
Yeah. And then the other 4 books are Advancing Cellist Handbook, Advancing Bassist Handbook, Advancing Violinist, Advancing, and Violist. And that's basically, again, I tried to put together a book about practicing that included a number of the things that I felt were missing from, because there's a lot of books out there on practicing, but I mean, I include some things like walkthroughs, bar by bar, to how to practice some of the most famous pieces from the repertoire that all young players seem to go through.
Okay.
Accolade for the violin, and like what you say, Elgar for the cello and stuff. And then I also have a short chapter in which I narrate an example of what could be going through a young string player's mind, in terms of problem solving and knowing, oh, well, then maybe I need to loop back to this and apply this idea here. Because I mean, just kind of ways to think of antidotes to the tendency to start at the beginning and play to the end.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's what a lot of students do. And I do my best to try to teach my students how to practice. When I have 50 in a class at a time, it's, obviously challenging to do. But try to give them some strategies and remind them that, spending, time with your instrument is not practicing your instrument. And just running a piece from top to bottom or playing your favorite parts and playing them really well is not practicing. We got to get to the nitty gritty, and my kids are so busy. My students in orchestra are so busy. The high school kids that they need to maximize. They don't have a lot of time to practice, so they need to find the parts they need to practice. They need to isolate them, and they need to dig in and get it done. So that way, when we come together, we're not having to do that in front of everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's good for them too, because I think when you feel like you're accomplishing a lot per unit time, it's easier to motivate yourself to get the instrument out as opposed to feeling like you're just kind of spinning your wheels.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a challenge, and today's kids are very distracted. They're, and they're, at least in my school, they're very academically, focused. So they're, there's tons of homework, and there's just not a lot of time, and I don't have a lot of students taking private lessons either in my school. So that's also challenging with just getting to bring the level up and invest that time. So for some of them, that's top of their priority list, and for others, it's third or fourth or fifth or lower on their priority list. So, but that's why we have different classes too. So those kids that really want to do a lot, they're in the chamber group and whatnot. So. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Right. I would love to get a list of your books and post them in the description of the podcast, so that Terrific. Way people can check them out. Most of them available on Amazon and other places too. Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon is I don't know, kind of weird that. So like the Advancing String Player's Handbook got re-released and have a different cover, and yet the easy thing to find on Amazon is the old edition for hundreds of dollars because it's out of print anyway.
Oh wow, okay, but, that is strange. Yeah, sometimes the search algorithms are not quite there in Amazon.
But yes, they all can be purchased online.
Cool. We'll definitely check that out. What are some of the, I guess if we could get into the cello pedagogy, because I know that there's a lot of people that would be really interested in it. What are some of the biggest things that you see? Maybe if we start with like your very youngest students or young students that you see, you know, in the schools or whatever, what are some of the biggest problems that you see?
That's an excellent question. I suppose first and foremost, because I get to work with about, I mean, it varies obviously, but sometimes 24 or more schools in a year.
Great.
Which I really enjoy, getting to see that kind of cross section of what's going on in the string classrooms, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go into a classroom situation and the posture is sometimes, of course, the first thing that jumps out at you.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I'm sometimes I know I'm playing the role of bad cop, but I feel like we just please put our feet on the floor and not slouch and sit on the edge of the chair and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But on top of that, there'll be times when I'll see people who are playing a full-size instrument when, in my opinion, they should still be on a three-quarter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you think about big Pedagogue or Lynn Harrell or something, for whom a full-size cello looks like a
dwarf.
Yeah, and it's like, does that hold them back at all? Do they feel like they're playing on this itty-bitty thing? No, it makes the cello very, very easy.
Yeah.
I think sometimes things like extensions, you know, it wouldn't be so likely to cause certain problems if we didn't bump them up to the next larger size as soon as happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
In my high school, I only have one student who has he takes lessons, and you know, she requested the 3/4 size, and I'm like, I don't have any. So I went out and found one from another school last year, and they're like, well, we're not using this. I'm like, I'll take it, and it's decent, you know, and she's happy with it. But yeah, there's only one, and I have, you know, I don't know, 25, 30 cellists, something like that. So, you know, it's definitely, I'm guessing now that you're making me think about this, I have to go back and look at my students and really check out and see if maybe that is a problem for them.
You know, just even the proportions of teenagers sometimes, where you're thinking about the checklists that we're trying to do when we fit a cello to them, and you're going, I'm going to have to compromise somewhere. But with a slightly smaller instrument, you can, okay, now it's here where it needs to be, and it's here, and I still have enough space there, and it's not. So anyway.
Yeah.
And then another thing is bow holds. Sometimes
can you give us some tricks? You know, I mean, I'm great at the violin bow hold, but I don't know if you're able to give us some you know, because I think for a lot of kids, it's that I'm using a pen here. Move my microphone. It's that like that balance issue with the, you know, pinky over it. On the violin and viola, we have this. We have a lot of control with that pinky, but on cellos, you know, generally we have less. So, what are some things that you might be able to tell us that might be helpful to eliminate some of those problems?
Right. I think in part, it often boils down to, for lack of a better word, a disengaged pinky. I could say a lazy pinky, you know.
Okay.
So in some respects, when it's a violin or violist who switch to cello, I mean, great, because now their pinky isn't just kind of, and because then once the pinky is not engaged, then the hand just keeps falling further and further.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically the bow games that Phyllis Young has in her playing the string game, and then some games that are from George Nykrug, some that I got from Christopher Bunting, some that I just added on my own. But there are some, I mean, it's like, okay, is it a game? No, you don't really get a particular score or anything. Right. But the idea of something, it's gamey in that you can do it very quickly, and it's just a thing that is very memorable.
Those are the things that we need, you know, especially as classroom teachers with a lot of kids. We need something that's quick. Yeah.
Right. So like even things like lifting second and third finger off of the stick is a great way, because if their pinky is trying not to be part of the bow hold at all, it won't work. You know?
Okay.
So and it kind of shows. It also keeps if you have a student with a hand where they're trying to let first finger run every aspect of the show, that's also not a good thing. Right. So this lifting 2 and 3, now we get this sense that as I go from frog to tip, yes, exactly. With this is the fulcrum. So that's a good one. I mean, Phyllis Young had things like knocking on the length of the bow, because of course when we knock, we don't tend to be
Right.
at an odd angle.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
mm-hmm.
How
Yeah.
about if I had a dime for every time I said play closer to the bridge to my cellists, I would have retired a long time ago. But
Right.
what are some, I don't know if you have any strategies or things that you've put on instruments before to help keep them from getting close to the fingerboard? And I told them, I said, if you reach your arm all the way down, you could play on the tailpiece if you wanted to. If your arm's long enough. Why are we? It's like we're like little Tyrannosaurus Rexes with no arms, and we're trying to bow on the cello. It's like it keeps coming up closer.
Yeah.
You have any strategies for that? Maybe
It's an excellent question, and I think it's a multi-pronged thing.
Sure.
The biggest one, of course, is that their brain isn't on their right hand; it's on their left.
Oh,
hand.
yeah, 100%, 100%. It's like, where does the sound come from? Yeah.
And then a second one is just kind of even the physics of the resistance of the string. The string itself pushes them where there's less resistance and where it's easier. But there's another component which is, I think at least somewhat strong in a lot of students and very strong in some, is that when they get closer to the bridge, the string noise picks up. The string itself kind of gets pickier about the weight to speed ratio.
Yes.
And so my favorite quick fix here, I don't know how many practice mutes you have, but when you put a practice mute on the bridge, then they can go and play really close to the bridge, and they're not getting that white noise, that gray noise, and they get used to what it feels like playing close to the bridge. And they can experiment and find out, okay, this is getting better contact, this is getting better response from the string. And then when you remove the practice mute, they have found the way to pull through that thicker resistance closer to the bridge.
That's great.
And that is a favorite of mine, to get students just
those heavy rubber or metal practice mutes.
Either. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to invest in some, and I'm going to try that a little bit. But I think that might be. I see what you're saying, and I do understand that, like, kids, they don't want to be scratchy. They don't want to sound scratchy, and it's easier to get that tone from when you're playing close to the bridge. But we need them there, and especially when they're in, they go to fourth position and they're playing over the fingerboard, and it sounds like, I just say, you sound like an old person singing. It's like very unhealthy. And not good. So that's fantastic. I think
that's funny. It's a good point too, because I think that sort of sound where their bow is way too close to where their hand is probably a much more offensive tone to our ears.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to mind that.
No, but I said, like, you're not projecting, and you just lose that. You lose the great cello tone quality when you're doing that. So we talk a lot about ratios, and it's like, okay, if you're playing a harmonic and then you're playing over your fingerboard, you're nearly halfway up your string with the string length. That's like taking your open string and putting the bow on your harmonic and trying to play it. Just doesn't work.
Yeah, right.
So we talk about ratios, and as we climb up the fingerboard, we have to move closer to the bridge. But it's definitely something that even to this day, after 29 years in the classroom, I'm still yelling at the kids about playing closer to the bridge, and I show them and I demonstrate, and it doesn't always work. So that anything I can try, I'm going to try.
Yeah. And you can point out a recording that you've made where they intentionally did that, and how wonderfully this visceral, rich string sound, and they'll nod and agree, and then they go back to it.
Right. Exactly. So I will try the mute thing and see if that helps. Yeah. Yeah. How about for some of your more advanced students? What are some of the bigger pitfalls that you see? I guess technique wise, it could be musicianship wise too. But
that's another good. And
there's a lot, I'm sure. Yeah.
Big question. Yeah. So in a nutshell, to kind of just choose as concisely as possible,
sure,
I would say that as they get more advanced, and I know I'm going to sound like a theory nerd, but I think the limiting factor more and more becomes their theory knowledge. I mean, you think about all these great master classes that we can see for free online of the great string players, and like, how often are they talking about changing some aspect of your bow hole, or maybe trying this different fingering? And instead what they're talking about is, well, now wait a second, so you've repeated this 3 times and then it becomes this, so what are we doing to set up this? They're talking about the form. And then from a technique standpoint, I do find that pretty much no matter from whom I have gotten a student, I spend a lot of time working with the right hand, working with the bow. In somewhat, to a certain extent, it's just the nature of music. We get used to reading these dots on a page, and that's information about, and so the poor bow just kind of chases the left hand around.
Kids worry about the left hand, and they don't think about the right hand. I'm like, the right hand's your voice. Right hand's where the sound comes from.
Absolutely.
All day long. So, okay. Yeah.
And then there's other just kind of rites of passage, like getting, not just playing high, but getting comfortable in high positions. And like in the violin world, this is the second violin, first violin.
Right. Yeah.
And for cello, I mean, it's funny. A lot of it just boils down to the fact that a lot of cello players know very concretely where all of those pitches can be found in the lower 4 positions. And then they can crawl their way up, by step, or an audible shift to a high note, but they don't have a geographical sense of where those notes are in the same way that they do in the lower positions. So, just kind of spending some time to, like what you say with ratios, find not just the halfway harmonic, but find the 2/3 and the 3/4, and so that even though, of course, non-string players look at it and how do you play without frets, but we look at it, we know, okay, this is where my halfway and this is the 2/3, so the note I want is here, and sure enough, it is.
Yeah, I remember when I studied with Andrew Smith at UNLV on cello. I don't know if you know Andy Smith. He's an amazing teacher. But he had me in thumb position, and I'm just playing D major scales. And then he said, okay, find all these easy songs and just play a whole bunch of, very basic tunes, melodies in that position, and whether it's major, minor, figure it out. And that really just helped me get comfortable, like you said. And
Nice.
So, that was one of the things that really helped me a lot, was just playing simple melodies in thumb position and transposing them up, 2 octaves, whatever it was.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah.
And keeping an awareness of what that would look like on the page to find those. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And how about, do you have students that come in and maybe aren't as comfortable with the tenor clef?
No.
Okay. I mean, normally when you're going into college, you probably have that. Do you have some tricks or tips for younger students to learn to tenor clef?
Yeah, when I go out to schools and work with schools, I do run across that some. But I mean, in some respects, tenor clef is just perfect for cello.
It really is.
and in some respects, bass clef is too. When you think about the fact that, okay, so anything below the whole thing is on the C string, and in the lower half, when you're early
That's a
on,
good point.
this is the G and this is on the D. Like, could you have asked for a better clef? And then when you say, okay, now tenor clef is just take your cello and, turn it a string, and everything is a string higher.
Yeah.
And then the problem in many cases becomes, oh, well, I don't know where those notes would be up on the D string to find them up on the A. And so then, in many cases, the best way to get really comfortable quickly with tenor clef is to take some of the stuff that they're used to playing over on the A string and just get them playing up on the D string
on those notes,
which
right?
May kind of sound like it's a bigger deal, but you know how a lot of young cellists love to go through a little phase where they're not going to play any open strings.
Yes.
You know,
At all.
and it's just for everything.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, let's go on up the D string for these. And so then when you think, okay, so a string higher, okay, now I can read tenor clef up through.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good point. That's a really good point, because we try to, you know, okay, we're teaching the tenor clef when we have high notes on the A string, but we should really be teaching him, you know, those positions first, and then you just cross over. Yeah.
I think that does make it really easy. You know, like, why have we been spending all this time going up the D string? Well, check this out.
Boom.
You know?
Yeah. Then it just like clicks, hopefully. So that's fantastic. What other things are there anything else that you're working on right now that you know you can share?
Yes. Fortunately, post-pandemic, I think, you know, I kind of thought that in 2023, 24, that we were kind of back, as it were. But this year, it feels like now I actually have enough performance opportunities. I'm starting to get to say no again. You know,
right,
what I mean?
right. after COVID, it's like yes. But right,
yes.
yeah.
So that's wonderful, because we're in this so much for the live music performance and not playing for that flashing red dot on the camera. No, we want to hear their breathing, and then you know, my podcast actually that is cello specific. I've been interviewing cellists from, I mean, mostly within the country, but I think it's certainly in the double digits from overseas as well.
Great.
And I'm on episode 156.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow, that's amazing. So what is the name of your podcast? Please share that.
It's called Cello Chat,
Cello
which
Chat.
is, I mean, of course, that makes it the same as if somebody types in Cello Chat, the first thing that comes up is the Eastman. They call theirs, so Lawrence Lesser and oh gosh. Anyway, at Eastman, the podcast there is called Cello Chat.
Oh, okay. So there's two cello chats.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, and I mean, mine is kind of a similar format to this, but I'll ask, like, a stock question I ask everybody about is motivating students to practice. And it's so fun. I mean, the whole thing, of course, I'm having a lot of fun with, but just hearing how of the various ways, well, how do I say it? It's like, in many cases, these 156 people are kind of saying the same thing, but in different ways.
Right.
You know, they're talking about that curiosity and that problem solving and that passion for the sound, the ear candy that we get when we're making those good tones. And but for the sake of even just my own studio watching this, I know that, you know, it's hard to get to the point of hearing too much about why you should consider yourself lucky to be a musician. And then that makes it very easy to get the instrument out and play some more.
Yeah. I find that it's getting more challenging to motivate students with all the different things that are out there now, you know. But what are some of the like the big takeaways that you've seen on your podcast for student motivation? Some of the big, like, overarching themes, maybe.
Yeah, I think in some respects, I want to say that nurturing a sense of curiosity, you know, so in other words, in some way, shape, or form, talking about finding a passion for the process of practicing.
Okay.
You know, whether that means making it a puzzle, but where we're going to proactively involve the brain, as opposed to, as you and I know, the opposite is when the hands are doing something and the brain kind of starts to daydream. What's on TV tonight or something? And we need the brain there.
Focused all the time.
Time goes by faster. You get more done. So that's probably the number one thing that kind of keeps coming back is the
Focus.
situations where people feel like they're starting to burn out or something like that. It's that their mind has just drifted, gotten in the habit of just watching the clock or something very unproductive.
Yeah, I've had those instances where you're reading a book and you get through a few pages like, wait a minute, I read it, but what did I just read?
Yeah.
Gotta go back.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to think of whose article I ran across most recently. There was kind of a study of that. What are professionals thinking when they practice versus what are young people? And I mean, unfortunately, with a lot of young people, it's like, thinking when I was practicing? What do you mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's that active mind that we have to get used to. This is really cool. I have to definitely check out your podcast, and I'll again, if I get that info from you, I can for your books, and then also from your podcast, definitely put those links up for you because I think that would be awesome for people to check out. I'm excited to check it out. I didn't know you had a podcast.
And in fact, we have, let me think, at least two people in common. I interviewed Rachel Dirks.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Who was my stand partner back at UT Austin. That was
Okay,
many years ago. And then also Jason Heath.
Right.
I mean, he's not a cellist, but I think out of it would kind of like once a year, I let myself interview somebody who's a non-cello player, but who I know well enough to know that they're going to say a lot of things that cellists need to hear.
Right. That's perfect.
So Jason on the bass, he plays with such facility. I mean, like a number of bass players can get around the bass in a way that just that ease of playing. It's kind of funny for some reason, whether it's just because cellists try to think more in these discrete positions all the time, now I'm moving to extended third position and now I'm moving to, and basses, I mean, like what you're saying, there's so much room to cover. They kind of can't afford to be blocky or
locked in, right? They have to be a little more flexible and
fluidity.
Yeah, I could see that. That's amazing. Very cool. Well, just this has been super fun to chat and catch up a little bit, and I'm so glad that you agreed to come on. Like I said, I just so much respect of what you do, and every time I go to one of your sessions or read one of your articles, it's just great knowledge and just inspiring. So thank you for all that you do.
Well, thank you. Well, and conversely, when my students head to ASTA conferences, I mean, I always have a list of people that, even if they're just talking about how to watch paint dry, it's a great session. And yours,
that's my next one for next year in 26 is how to watch paint dry.
Early on, I was and this is a while ago. I mean, I don't mean to. Maybe I was kind of a Luddite when it came to some of these technology things, but some of your sessions,
that's right.
You were so excited about what you could do with some of these things. And then I do this and like, okay, yes, I should give that a try.
Yeah. I love the technology and that's, part of the reason I like doing the podcast too, but it's just great to catch up with people and share. Thank you for sharing all your awesome knowledge today. And we really appreciate you being on here. So thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
So for episode 102, we will see you all later. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. You can support the work I do by hitting that like button and subscribing to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast YouTube channel and visiting www.orchestrateacher.net.